Part Two, Chapter 4 of Burning Daylight by Jack London. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Nathaniel Letton was talking when the door opened. He ceased, and with his two companions, gazed with controlled perturbation at Burning Daylight striding into the room. The free, swinging movements of the trail traveler were unconsciously exaggerated in that stride of his. In truth, it seemed to him that he felt the trail beneath his feet. "Howdy, gentlemen, howdy," he remarked, ignoring the unnatural calm with which they greeted his entrance. He shook hands with them in turn, striding from one to another, and gripping their hands so heartily that Nathaniel Letton could not forbear to wince. Daylight flung himself into a massive chair and sprawled lazily, with an appearance of fatigue. The leather grip he had brought into the room he dropped carelessly beside him on the floor. "God Almighty, I've sure been going some," he sighed. "We sure trimmed them beautiful. It was real slick. And the beauty of the play never dawned on me till the very end. It was pure and simple knock down and drag out. And the way they fell for it was amazing." The geniality in his lazy Western drawl reassured them. He was not so formidable after all. Despite the act that he had effected an entrance into the face of Letton's instructions to the outer office, he showed no indication of making a scene or playing rough. "Well," Daylight demanded good-humoredly, "ain't you-all got a good word for your partner? Or has his sure enough brilliance plumb dazzled you-all?" Letton made a dry sound in his throat. Dowsett sat quietly and waited, while Leon Guggenhammer struggled into articulation. "You have certainly raised Cain," he said. Daylight's black eyes flashed in a pleased way. "Didn't I, though?" he proclaimed jubilantly. "And didn't we fool 'em? I was totally surprised. I never dreamed they would be that easy. And now," he went on, not permitting the pause to grow awkward, "we all might as well have an accounting. I'm pulling west this afternoon on that blamed 20th Century." He tugged at his grip, got it open, and dipped into it with both his hands. "But don't forget, boys, when you all want me to hornswoggle Wall Street another flutter, all you have to do is whisper the word. I'll sure be right there with the goods." His hands emerged, clutching a great mass of stubs, checkbooks, and brokers' receipts. These he deposited in a heap on the big table, and dipping again, he fished out the stragglers and added them to the pile. He consulted a slip of paper drawn from his coat pocket and read aloud: $10,027,042.68 is my figuring on my expenses. Of course, that was all taken from the winnings before we all get to figuring on the whack-up. Where's your figures? It must have been a good old mighty big clean-up." The three men looked their bepuzzlement at one another. The man was a bigger fool than they had imagined, or else he was playing a game which they could not divine. Nathaniel Letton moistened his lips and spoke up. "It will take some hours yet, Mr. Harnish, before the full accounting can be made. Mr. Howison is at work upon it now. As you say, it has been a gratifying clean-up. Suppose we have lunch together and talk it over. I'll have the clerks work through the noon hour so that you will have ample time to catch your train." Dowsett and Guggenhammer manifested a relief that was almost obvious. The situation was clearing. It was disconcerting, under the circumstances, to be pent in the same room with this heavy-muscled, Indian-like man whom they had robbed. They remembered unpleasantly the many stories of his strength and recklessness. If Letton could only put him off long enough for the men to escape into the policed world outside the office door, all would be well. And Daylight showed all the signs of being put off. "I'm really glad to hear that," he said. "I don't want to miss that train, and you-all have done me proud, gentlemen, letting me in on this deal. I just do appreciate it without being able to express my feelings. But I am sure almighty curious, and I'd like terrible to know, Mr. Letton, what your figures of our winnings is. Can you all give me a rough estimate?" Nathaniel Letton did not look appealingly at his two friends, but in the brief pause they felt that appeal pass out from him. Dowsett, of sterner mold than the others, began to divine that the Klondiker was playing, but the other two were still older the blandishment of his childlike innocence. "It's extremely difficult," Leo Guggenheimer began. "You see, Ward Valley has fluctuated so that no estimate can possibly be made in advance," Letton supplemented. Approximated," Daylight counseled cheerfully. "It don't hurt if you all are a million or so off one side or the other. The figures'll straighten that up. But I'm that curious I'm just itching all over. What do you say?" "Why continue to play at cross purposes?" Dawson demanded abruptly and coldly. "Let us have the explanation here and now. Mr. Harnish is laboring under a false impression, and he should be set straight. In this deal..." But Daylight interrupted. He had played too much poker to be unaware or unappreciative of the psychological factor, and he headed Dowsett off in order to play the denouncement of the present game in his own way. "Speaking of deals," he said, "reminds me of a poker game I once seen in Reno, Nevada. It wasn't what you-all would call a square game. They all was tin horns that sat in. But there was a tenderfoot, shorthorns they are all called out there. He stands in behind the dealer and sees the same dealer give himself 4 aces often the bottom of the deck. The tenderfoot is sure shocked. He slides around to the player facing the dealer across the table. 'Say,' he whispers, 'I seen that dealer deal himself 4 aces.' 'Well, what of it?' said the player. 'I'm trying to tell you-all because I think you ought to know,' says the tenderfoot. 'I tell you-all I seen him deal himself 4 aces.' 'Say, mister,' says the player, 'you-all better get out of here. You-all don't understand the game. It's his deal, ain't it?" The laughter that greeted his story was hollow and perfunctory, but Daylight appeared not to notice it. "Your story has some meaning, I suppose," Dowsett said pointedly. Daylight looked at him innocently and did not reply. He turned jovially to Nathaniel Letton. "Fire away," he said. "Give us an approximation of our winnings. As I said before, a million out one way or the other won't matter. It's bound to be such an almighty big winning." By this time Letton was stiffened by the attitude Dowsett had taken, and his answer was prompt and definite. "I fear you are under a misapprehension, Mr. Harnish. There are no winnings to be divided with you. Now don't get excited, I beg of you. I have but to press this button." Far from excited, Daylight had all the seeming of being stunned. He felt absently in his vest pocket for a match, lighted it, and discovered that he had no cigarette. The 3 men watched him with the tense closeness of cats. Now that it had come, they knew that they had a nasty few minutes before them. "Do you-all mind saying that over again?" Daylight said. "Seems to me I ain't got it just exactly right. You-all said..." He hung with painful expectancy on Nathaniel Letton's utterance. "I said you were under a misapprehension, Mr. Harnish, that was all. You have been stock gambling, and you have been hard hit. But neither Ward Valley nor I nor my associates feel that we owe you anything." Daylight pointed at the heap of receipts and stubs on the table. "That all represents $10,027,042.68 hard cash. Ain't it good for anything here?" Letton smiled and shrugged his shoulders. Daylight looked at Dowsett and murmured, "I guess that story of mine had some meaning after all." He laughed in a sickly fashion. "It was your deal, all right, and you-all dole them right, too. Well, I ain't kicking. I'm like the player in the poker game. It was your deal, and you-all had a right to do your best. And you done it. Cleaned me out slicker'n a whistle." He gazed at the heap on the table with an air of stupefaction. and that all ain't worth the paper it's written on. Gol dast it, you-all can sure deal 'em round when you get a chance. Oh, no, I ain't a-kicking. It was your deal, and you-all certainly done me, and a man ain't half a man that squeals on another man's deal. And now the hand is played out, and the cards are on the table, and the deal's over, but his hand, dipping swiftly into his inside breast pocket, appeared with a big Colt's automatic. As I was saying, the old deal's finished. Now it's my deal, and I'm going to see if I can hold them four aces. Take your hand away, you white sepulchre, he cried sharply. Nathaniel Letton's hand, creeping toward the push button on the desk, was abruptly arrested. Change chairs, Daylight commanded. Take that chair over there, you gangrene-livered skunk. Jump, by God, or I'll make you leak till folks think your father was a water hydrant and your mother a sprinkling cart. You-all move your chair alongside, Guggenhammer, and you-all, Dowsett, sit right there while I just irreverently explain the virtues of this here automatic. She's loaded for big game, and she goes off 8 times. She's sure a hummer when she gets started. Preliminary remarks being over, I now proceed to deal. Remember, I ain't making no remarks about your deal. You done your darnest, and it was all right. But this is my deal, and it's up to me to do my darndest. In the first place, you-all know me. I'm Burning Daylight, savvy? Ain't afraid of God, devil, death, nor destruction. Them's my 4 aces, and they sure cooper your bets. Look at that there living skeleton, Letton. You're sure afraid to die. Your bones is all rattling together, you're that scared. And look at that fat Jew there. The little weapon sure put the fear of God in his heart. He's yellow as a sick persimmon. Dowsett, you're a cool one. You ain't batted an eye nor turned a hair. That's because you're great on arithmetic. And that makes you-all dead easy in this deal of mine. You're sitting there and adding 2 and 2 together, and you-all know I sure got you skinned. You know me, and that I ain't afraid of nothing. And you-all adds up all your money, and you knows you ain't going to die if you can help it. I'll see you hanged, was Dowsett's retort. Not by a damn sight. When the fun starts, you're the first I plug. I'll hang all right, but you-all won't live to see it. You-all die here now while I die subject to the law's delay. Savvy? Being dead, with grass growing out of your carcasses, you won't know when I hang. But I'll sure have the pleasure a long time of knowing you-all beat me to it. Daylight paused. You surely wouldn't kill us? Letton asked in a queer, thin voice. Daylight shook his head. It's sure too expensive. You-all ain't worth it. I'd sooner have my chips back, and I guess you-all'd sooner give my chips back than go to the dead house. A long silence followed. Well, I've done dealt. It's up to you-all to play. But while you're deliberating, I want to give you-all a warning. If that door opens and any one of you cusses lets on there's anything unusual, right here and then, I sure start plugging. There ain't a soul that'll get out the room, except feet first. A long session of 3 hours followed. The deciding factor was not the big automatic pistol, but the certitude that Daylight would use it. Not alone were the 3 men convinced of this, but Daylight himself was convinced. He was firmly resolved to kill the men if his money was not forthcoming. It was not an easy matter on the spur of the moment to raise 10 millions in paper currency, and there were vexatious delays. A dozen times Mr. Howerson and the head clerk were summoned into the room. On these occasions the pistol lay on Daylight's lap, covered carelessly by a newspaper, while he was usually engaged in rolling or lighting his brown paper cigarettes. But in the end the thing was accomplished. A suitcase was brought up by one of the clerks from the waiting motor car, and Daylight snapped it shut on the last package of bills. He paused at the door to make his final remarks. There's 3 several things I sure want to tell you-all. When I get outside this door, you-all be set free to act. And I just want to warn you-all about what to do. In the first place, no warrants for my arrest, savvy? This money's mine, and I ain't robbed you of it. If it gets out how you gave me the double cross and how I done you back again, the laugh'll be on you, and it'll sure be an almighty big laugh. You can't afford that laugh. Besides, having got back my stake that you-all robbed me of, if you arrest me and try to rob me a second time, I'll go gunning for you-all, and I'll sure get you. No little fraid cat shrimps like you can skin Burning Daylight. If you win, you lose, and there'll sure be some several unexpected funerals around this burg. Just look me in the eye, and you-all savvy I mean business. Them stubs and receipts on the table is all yourn. Good day." As the door shut behind him, Nathaniel Letton sprang for the telephone, and Dowsett intercepted him. "What are you going to do?" Dowsett demanded. "The police. It's downright robbery. I won't stand it. I tell you I won't stand it." Dawson smiled grimly, but at the same time bore the slender financier back and down into his chair. "We'll talk it over," he said, and in Leon Guggenhammer he found an anxious ally. And nothing ever came of it. The thing remained a secret with the three men, nor did Daylight ever give the secret away, though that afternoon, leaning back in his stateroom at the 20th Century, his shoes off and feet on a chair, he chuckled long and heartily. New York remained forever puzzled over the affair, nor could it hit upon a rational explanation. By all rights, Burning Daylight should have gone broke, yet it was known that he immediately reappeared in San Francisco, possessing an apparently unimpaired capital. This was evidenced by the magnitude of the enterprises he engaged in, such as, for instance, Panama Mail, by sheer weight of money and fighting power wresting the control away from Shiftily and selling out in 2 months to the Harriman interests at a rumored enormous advance. End of Part 2, Chapter 4.